Hello, friends. How are you? Welcome to Monday. How was your weekend? You should right now go into the comments and tell me how your weekend was. I like hearing from you, and yeah, and then you can leave that comment now, and then after you've watched this video, you can tell me that I'm a sexist, misogynist in the comments after I talk about what I'm going to talk about today. So shower thought. I had a shower thought today based on some reading that I've been doing. These two books in particular, but also lots of others in the past, as well as other forms of written media or spoken media that had a kind of a bit of a thought, because I've been trying to figure out why I don't like this book. And why this book, well, I didn't like either of these books particularly. But one of these I got through, and one of these it's made me not want to read. Like, I just don't get, it doesn't work for me. So this is Harlan Coben's I Will Find You, published in 2023. So I read Harlan Coben, the first book I read of his was The Woods, which was like 2006. So here we are, like that many years later, 17 years later. One of his early books, one of his later books. And this one, didn't enjoy it much. I skimmed a lot. This is one of those like high action thrillers where there's not really anything to figure out. I mean, there is, but it's just kind of, you don't have time to think about it because it's just go, go, go. And the person's literally on the run the entire book. And you're just like, okay. And then the ending, of course, wraps up in a very unsatisfying way. Like, it just kind of abrupt end, and then we do the flash to 3 months later, like most of these books do, and it just kind of feels gross and weird, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. Very much enjoyed The Woods. This one, not so much. But I got through this book. I finished it. This book, however, is She Loves Me Not, from Wendy Corsi Staub. I've heard of this person. I've heard of her books. I've heard they're very good. Wanted to give it a shot. I have made it 51 pages in. That was probably 2 weeks ago, and I haven't touched it since. I'm really struggling to read this book. I find it to be tiresome, tedious. There's 50 pages in, there's probably been 30 names, and I don't know if I'm supposed to keep track of these people or not. There's been no moments of like just normalcy, and this has just been dialogue, and it's confusing. I don't get it. Not enjoying this book at all. And it made me think, do I not enjoy this book because it was written by a female? Here's where we go off the rails, and I probably say some things that are maybe offensive to some people, and that's not my intent here. I'm literally trying to understand my own reason for not enjoying this, also not enjoying this, but reading this and not reading this. Well, there's got to be something there. And when I said earlier, like spoken media, spoken whatever, like there's a trope of, on the internet specifically, of women aren't funny, women comedians aren't funny. I find that to be false at large, but I do see a difference between women's comedy and men's comedy. And I think I see a difference between women's novels and men's novels. Not meaning a novel written for women. I don't think that's what this is. I think this is a novel that's been written to tell a story. I don't think this is a novel written for men. In fact, the person who let me borrow this, or the people who let me borrow this, are women. Like, they love these books. These weren't written with those particular people in mind. But this was written by a woman, this was written by a man. This also, I think, applies to books written by members of the LGBTQ plus non-binary. Like, I have read some of their works as well, and there are differences there. And I think it just comes down to identity in a lot of ways. As a man, and you're writing, a man story about a man, you're going to write man things into this. And sometimes women will try to do that, and it's funny because it either becomes clownish because they go over the top with it, or they try to inject some, like, this is what it feels like to be a man, and it's not. And it feels weird and it feels awkward. Also, however, I have read books written by women that I don't remember who it was, but recently I read a book. Oh no, I'm thinking the other way around. I have read books by women that convinced me that they understood the male like life and the male brain. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not necessarily talking about like macho stuff, feminine stuff. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's just the way we move through the world. Women's authors, I find that the books or that their prose, specifically not necessarily the stories are fine. I find that they tend to focus more on aesthetic details, meaning that they talk more about colors and smells and feels and visuals than men do when they write. And maybe I'm completely apeshit crazy about this. I'm obviously painting with gigantically broad brushes here and saying that all women write this way and all that's not true. Obviously it's not true. I know that. I'm not an idiot. But in this particular case, I feel like it is. I feel like I've gotten 51 pages into a book where this woman has written a ton of just ancillary detail, and I'm assuming this is like a thriller or a mystery novel. I'm supposed to keep track of details, but I don't know what to keep track of. There's just stuff. There's like 50 pages of stuff, and I don't know what that stuff is. It's not condensed to necessary for the story information. And that, I think, is the way that I find some women write differently. That being said, there have been many female authors that I have read that do that have that exposition, extra non-important detail, but I love it because the way that they describe things, the way that they talk about the tea or whatever, like, has been fantastic. For instance, who was the lady that I read last year, like 3 or 4 of the books from her series. She writes the French Inspector Gamache novels. Whoever that person is, I forget her name. I found her mysteries to be dumb. I didn't like her mysteries. I thought they were just kind of dull. But I found her setting and her characters and the little world that she crafted and the quaintness of it, that was fascinating. I loved the fact that she put all this ancillary work into making these people feel like a quaint little, lost in time town. That was phenomenal. Her mystery part, the mysteries were just kind of like, okay, whatever, sure. Whereas with somebody like Harlan, his mysteries might be a little bit more subversive and sneaky, and then they come with a big reveal at the end. But he doesn't pad that with detail. I don't want to say unnecessary detail. I feel like that's been, like, people oversay unnecessary detail. Is what Wendy is writing in here unnecessary detail? I don't know, because I've only gotten 51 pages into the book. But what I can tell you is, it's keeping me from continuing. It's difficult for me to read this book because I don't know what I'm supposed to be keeping track of, and I can't keep track of all of it. So I'm just kind of hoping that it'll unveil itself and I won't have to remember anything. I think that's the difference for me. And like, as a fan of both this and comedy, I can tell you that's kind of the same thing for female comics. There are female comics that I watch them and I find them humorous, but I don't laugh out loud funny because the way that they approach the world is completely different from mine. It would be like trying to understand the comedy of a German. We all know that Germans have really weird... We all know, meaning that Americans... I don't know who knows, whatever. It's a common idea that Germans have this very dry sense of humor. But to them, that's laugh out loud funny. To me, it's just kind of like, same sort of thing. I think it's all just perspective and the way that we move through the world. And sometimes I don't engage with it. And I think that's perfectly okay. And I think it's okay to say that I'm not connecting with this book because it's describing a world in a way that I don't perceive the world. It's describing things in a way that I don't describe things. And it makes it very difficult for me to follow along. Is that fair to say? I think that's what I'm trying to get at. I don't know. I'm still working on this. I'd love your help to try to figure out what it is I'm saying here. Because to me, I like books from everybody. I think. I mean, I have historically liked books from everybody. And there have been men that have written similar books that I also have not liked because they go into too much detail or whatever. And maybe it's not the detail. It's just the type of detail, right? I don't know. I'm going to keep thinking on it. This was just a shower thought. Remember, take it easy. I'm not trying to say anything controversial here. I'm trying to understand myself so that I can grow and be better. Help me do that. Down in the comments. Thank you for stopping by today and checking this out. Please, obviously, leave a comment. But please also give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, please do so. I very much appreciate it when you do. I've had positive subscriber growth recently, and that's a good trend. So let's keep it up for 2025. See you tomorrow. Today's 1,000 plus little things happy, successful people do differently. We are learning 10 things you must give up to move forward. Number 2. Oh, we're only on number 2. The shame of past failures. Your past does not equal your future. Just because you failed yesterday or today or for the last 6 months or the last 16 years doesn't have any impact on the current moment. All that matters is that what you do right now. I've been this one, that right there, what that just said, that's been my life for the last 8-ish years. Since my family moved out in 2017, I've been working really hard on remembering that who I was when my kids were little is not who I am now, and that's okay. And I don't have to keep beating myself up over it.